Welcome, where business buying banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Let's get down to the brass tacks.
There she is. What's happening?
Oh my, it's another beautiful day on a Thursday.
Well, you're in Wisconsin. What does beautiful mean? Like 37 degrees or what?
It's not bad. I mean, we had snow yesterday. The grass is green and spring is
Not
coming.
anymore. The grass is white.
It was yesterday, but it all melted.
My buddy sent me a picture from Montreal this morning. He said yesterday he was walking around. I didn't say flip-flops, but it was like walking around like on dry pavement. And today shows me looks like a foot of snow.
Oh yeah. Our friends with the Soaring Profits, I saw a post. They got 6 to 8 inches of snow.
They're in Toronto, right? I think.
I believe so. Yeah. So
good guys.
They are. They are. I enjoy their YouTube show. Today we're going to talk about post-acquisition challenges, Richard. And I pulled up a statistic. I was just curious on Biz Buy Sell. Did you know in 2023, a total of 9,093 small businesses were sold in the United States? 9,093. And the year prior was 9,054. So just a smidgen higher. No stats yet for this year. Curious if economy and market and where we're at today in election year, if that will change. But my thought behind these numbers, how many of those 9,000 year over year had post-acquisition challenges? What do you think?
Well, a good number one, a high percentage. That's number one. Number two, that $9,000 number is not accurate. It's accurate for related to deals that were done on Biz Buy Sell.
Oh,
when you take the total number of businesses that are sold, and fasten your seatbelt right now, the average small business, there's of businesses that are considered to be sold. The ones on Biz Buy Sell represent a fraction of it. Some of the numbers that are banged around is about 1 million businesses a year. Now, I think it's less because that includes a lot of businesses where maybe, real small owner operator only, but the number that Biz Buy Sell is like a sand pebble on the Fort Lauderdale beach compared to the whole industry. But irrespective of that, yes, from all the ones that are sold, unless it's really well planned out and transitioned, they had lots of challenges.
Yeah. So this number does not
listen to us.
There you go. So the Biz Buy Sell number only represents from their platform.
Yeah.
You're talking to a lot of aspiring buyers that want to maybe buy businesses that are not on the market. And I love your course and your webinars that you're holding these days, because you teach a lot of buyers how to get in front of the people that aren't selling, to think about selling. And you do a great job of that. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. The private markets are critical because everybody's seeing all the ones that are the business for sale websites of the public markets. They serve a very useful purpose for a lot of buyers, but you got to dig much deeper. I mean, you can't limit yourself to just that. I mean, it's if not, those represent a fraction of businesses that are going to get sold. And, the numbers are typically about 75% of those don't sell. And so limiting yourself to just that database or those types of databases makes no sense whatsoever. But I appreciate the comment with the webinar, where you and I are both trying to give aspiring entrepreneurs and business buyers practical advice they could put to use quickly and in the real world.
Yeah. And it's been eye-opening for me, because I solely represent buyers that need funding with the SBA. And I talk to you quite often because sometimes, and probably more often, a lot of these listings don't qualify for SBA, but you have other avenues of how to work with buyers to buy these businesses. So
Absolutely. Yep.
that's been really wonderful for me to listen in, and the Q&A that these buyers that are dreaming to buy a business that you have at the end of these free webinars has been just valuable for everyone.
Thank
So
you.
I am
And we're glad to have you. The Q&As will get longer, so
yeah,
appreciate it. Good.
it's a plug. It's a plug. Can you maybe, before we get into our topic today, share with people where they would go to this free webinar?
Well, we're going to keep posting them on richardparker.com. The next one, we're probably going to be this, probably somewhere between the 16th and 20th of April, just finalize the date. But as soon as that's finalized, which should be by Monday, then we'll post it on the homepage of richardparker.com.
And
And we post it on Search Funder and some other locations, but that's the main location.
I love that. And explain to our viewers and listeners who can join these. Anyone that's just curious of what it looks like, or
Yep.
people that are more seasoned, or you
Nope.
get a mixed bag of it all.
We got a mixed bag. Everybody's welcome.
Mhm. Yeah.
We have
And-
the greatest immigration part. It's like our borders. Everybody's welcome.
There we go. Yes. So yeah, thanks for putting up the link, Sia. richardparker.com. If you are interested in buying businesses and where to even start, richardparker.com is where to go. And I need to throw in a plug that Richard has been doing this for 20 years, maybe longer, Richard?
Yeah, M&A for 34 and the buyer education pieces for over 20 years. Wow.
Yeah.
It's actually 23 years this month, April
There
23rd.
you go.
Yeah.
This is the person, ladies and gentlemen, where you want to get advice from, not someone that just bought a business or two in the last couple of years and now they're selling a course how to buy a business.
We have a lot of those.
Big difference. There are a lot of them.
We
So
have a lot of those. And we have a lot of them who never bought a business that are giving advice.
there you go. I agree with you there.
Yeah, you and I see that every day.
You know it. All right. So back to the show with this. You said a million businesses were sold last year, probably in that ballpark. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean,
Overall?
the numbers that have always been banged around is, there's a business tends to trade every 5 years.
Okay.
And there's, and you'd have, in the businesses that are deemed to be in that category, about 5 million businesses. And so there's the numbers, right? If
Yeah.
close to 1 million businesses, and most of them are done between family members, strategic acquisitions, institutional investors, other individuals, family members. And so what we don't see publicly listed for sale is the majority of the market.
I love that, because perhaps some of them are better quality.
Yep.
You're doing this a long time. Would you agree to that, Richard?
Yeah, by and large, I would.
Okay.
The reason being is on the publicly, businesses that are put up publicly listed for sale, not all of them, and certainly in the real lower market, Main Street USA businesses, they just don't have a lot of infrastructure to them. There's usually no second in command. There's poor books and records. They're not ready to be sold. They couldn't be potentially operated by anybody else but the owner. And so they're, there's a lot of issues and challenges and problems related to those much smaller entities. And when you start lumping in ones that are one owner operator, that's the only employee into the numbers. I mean, they just aren't the type of businesses that are going to transition to another individual.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Right on. So speaking of transition, today's show is about what are those post-acquisition challenges for the new owner. And I was thinking maybe the title should have been changed a little bit, because a lot of those post challenges should be ironed out before the transaction.
Yep.
So share with us maybe your top 2 challenges that you see and that you mentor and coach to business buyers to get handled perhaps before they sign the transaction is sold.
So there's 2 parts, what happens after and what happens before. So if we're talking about getting prepared in advance, and we'll talk about afterwards, because a whole different set of issues that you've got to deal with. But beforehand, what individuals need to look at, and people get so mired in the deal that they forget about looking at this, is, okay, what does life look like for me after this sale? What is the seller going to do? A seller, there's typically a transition or training period. What is specifically do I need them to teach me during this training period? Exactly what it is that I need to know, and have I negotiated a long enough training period? Yes, it's your business. Once you get the keys, you want to put your mark on it. You're the new sheriff in town. You don't want to keep them there to perpetuity, obviously, but you have them there during a training period. You better take real advantage of their time there. So laying out a very clear plan of what you want to accomplish during that training period of 30, 60 days, or sometimes even much longer, laying out that plan in advance to make sure you're both aligned, because the seller might say I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, or they don't even know what they're expected to do. They oftentimes think I just have to keep coming into the office every day, doing what I'm doing, and they're going to follow me around like a little puppy, and they're going to learn as we go. And it shouldn't be done that way. So being very clear with the seller of what the expectations are, and similarly getting feedback from them saying, what is it that you need to teach me? Like, what is it that I need to know specifically? So it's a good collaboration. It's never antagonistic, but really collaborating with the seller, saying, let's put a robust plan together to make sure the training is really effective.
Mm-hmm. And are there transition agreements that are drafted before the sale and agreed upon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the purchase agreement that indicates how long the seller is going to stay post-closing, what compensation there may be to them, if anything. Generally, the smaller the business, the larger the free period. So smaller businesses, there's usually a free training period. If the buyer wants them to stay on for longer, they typically will stay on and get compensated. Often it's in a diminished role over time, but that's all agreed to in advance. Certainly you need that in place, because if it gets breached, you have a problem, right?
That's right.
And that's why oftentimes you need to have holdbacks. If there's a more robust, more detailed or difficult transition, meaning it's just, there's more technical things that you need to know related to running the business, and you need to keep the seller on board for a significant amount of time for that transition. I'm not talking years, I'm talking several months or a little longer. Oftentimes you need to have a piece of the deal held in escrow to make sure they complete the training and transition as agreed.
And everyone that's listening, depending upon where your source of funding is coming from in these transactions, will determine how extensive that transition agreement can be, the terms, the structure, because SBA has its own set of guidelines. If you're going down a conventional avenue or a different source of funding or 100% seller financing, you may be able to draft up a longer transition period and perhaps a longer time where the seller does stay on, whether you want that or not. I leave that up to the advisors like Richard to determine what should that look like, right?
What is the with the SBA? There are certain guidelines as to how long a seller can stay as an employee, right?
Right. The seller can stay on as a consultant, not on payroll, post loan closing, up to 12 months and no longer if it's 100% asset purchase agreement split, right? Ownership is passing 100%. And I always recommend to buyers in that 1 year agreement or whatever less it may be, it can't be more than 12 months. If there's any kind of monetary compensation that the seller wants to earn, can't be a W-2 paycheck. It has to be a 1099 consulting agreement.
What if it doesn't subscribe to 1099, meaning there's certain criteria related to 1099s that you're only allowed to pay people who meet certain a litmus test, right? They can't be required to provide certain reporting. They can't be aren't required to be in the office every day. They're allowed to work on things, but can't guarantee certain outcomes. I mean, it's become much more complex than it used to be. But if the seller is working there full time, are they still able to meet the guidelines of what's considered a 1099?
Well, I'm not a CPA, so I got
Thank God. Okay,
right.
that's why you're too much fun to be a CPA.
Oh, yeah. All I do know is they cannot be on payroll per SBA SOP. Now, if you go down a different road and Richard has ideas to send buyers for different sources of funding, then change that up. But on the SBA side, it has to be on a consulting basis and off of W-2 payroll. Uh, I will recommend to buyers just maybe it's an hourly amount of money that's paid in the consulting agreements, and you just figure that out.
Yeah.
Sometimes sellers don't want to get paid. It's just their
Yep.
duty to
Yeah.
help make sure the transition is successful because it's their legacy and it
Right.
means that much to them. Um,
Good point. Yeah.
but if you think about it, Richard, 12 months isn't long.
No.
It's rare I see any agreements with the SBA where it is 12 months. I think the max maybe I'll see is 6 months, maybe 3, and then call as needed kind of a thing. But
Right.
most want them out of their hair.
Oh, absolutely. And we could leads probably into good post-acquisition transition is you want the seller there to help you for a meaningful transition, however long that could be, a couple of months or whatever makes the most sense. And then it's your business. You want to get them the hell out of there. I mean, you may want to have a longer contract in case you
Yeah.
need it, but it should be solely at the buyer's option. I say, tell people you're the new sheriff in town. It's time to put your mark on the business. You're going to find employees are going to the old owner and asking them questions, or there's certain office politics or other stuff going on. People just, changing the culture may be difficult while the old owner is in place. And so it's your business. If you need the seller for far too long to train you, you probably shouldn't buy that business. You want to have them a meaningful transition period. There are exceptions where they may have, close relations with a specific account. You may have to keep them on longer just to handle that, or for other cosmetic reasons. But, for the most part, get in, learn as much as you can. And once they start to become a bit of the pain in the dupa, as you would say, you got to get them the hell out. It's your
right.
business. Time to run it.
And you helped walked into the next topic for post-acquisition challenges. And you said culture. How would a buyer understand what the culture is before the transaction is signed? Because sometimes, how do you know? How do you know what the culture is?
It can be difficult, but it's certainly not impossible. You can and that's why I always tell people during the discussions and negotiations with the sellers, before you get into all the minutia of the deal details, you want to have a really meaningful, thoughtful conversation, and ongoing meaningful and thoughtful conversations with the sellers, because the more time you spend with them on a human level, the greater your insight can be into how that business runs. Their persona, and they really project the culture. So if there's someone that is micromanaging every part of the deal, or you sit in a meeting with them and they're interrupted 20 times by employees, or you find out that they can't take any time away from the business, you understand that for whatever reason, whether it's poor employees or poor owner, they're probably micromanaging the business. And so you could draw the conclusion that you're going to be walking into a place where employees are really have the owner's thumb on them all the time, which is either one of two things. Either they need it, or they're going to welcome you empowering them and giving them some latitude. And when I say welcome, they need it. Well, if they need to be micromanaged, the reality is they're the wrong employees. And so you want to be able to, as far as culture, you can get some really good insight by spending time at the business. And of course, if there's any key employees in the business that are really necessary to keep that business moving forward, you have to meet with them.
That's right.
As a condition to the deal. And so you'll be able to get good feedback if you approach this in a really thoughtful way, and not getting boggled down in the minutia and the financials solely when you're doing your review and investigation.
And I often hear you mention during your free webinars for buyers to not micromanage the due diligence hard with the seller. You have to kind of build that relationship, and it's like you're managing an employee already, which is the seller. And how do you get them to like you and to give you positive, honest feedback? I remember a deal I funded a couple of years ago. The seller and the buyer built up that relationship, and it was so important to the buyer to retain the current employees. The seller was nice enough to say, hey, this key employee, her name is Jane, will say, she definitely deserves a raise, and I'm not going to give it to her until you take over ownership, just to kind of tidy up and strengthen that
Smart.
relationship.
Yeah,
That
smart.
is smart. So what I found, and you echo this in your webinars a lot, the buyer built up the relationship with the seller over the 60 days of due diligence and studying everything. And the seller really grew to love this buyer. And the buyer kept telling me, man, we're just like a father son, so to speak. And he
That's
really likes
great.
me. Yep. And it was the seller's idea to toss this in. And sure enough, in the business plan for the SBA underwriter, it was written in there, all the key employees, how long they've been with the company, and what are the plans to retain them as the new owner. And
Right.
that's an added plus to the deal.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great point, because when the buyer, and I think we've talked about this before, when the buyer and seller like and trust each other,
Mhm.
and the buyer wants to buy and the seller wants to sell, you can't stop them from getting a deal done.
Right.
And they will get it done. A seller will get it done with a buyer that they believe is best suited for their business over someone who may come with a larger offer. If when the seller reaches the point, and I've been on that side representing sellers where we've had meetings where people have barged in, and it's like, the buyer thinks they're the smartest person in the room, and sort of dressing down the seller about all the things that are no good in their business. I'm thinking they like, you know nothing about this business. What do you think? You're trying to prove how smart you are? And the seller's like, never want to talk to them again.
Yeah.
Yet when you get someone in who comes in, you have a good, thoughtful conversation, the buyer and the seller connect, it's engaging, it's whatever. I've seen it so many times where the meeting is over and the seller looks at me and goes, that's the guy.
There you
Or
go.
that's the gal. That's who I want buying my business. And once that happens, they're going to be very amenable related to deal terms, price, conditions, etc., because they all of a sudden see that, hey, this is the person with whom I can trust with my business going forward, and my legacy, and my employees. A lot of sellers just care about how much am I getting in closing, and that's fine too. But there is a significant percentage of sellers that care deeply about their legacy, and deeply about their employees, and deeply about their clients, and deeply about their suppliers, and they want to make sure it's the right person. I mean, it's not only about the money. Money is important, but it's not everything.
Yes, and I have seen that too. I have witnessed where there was that seller-buyer close-knit relationship. And one deal in particular, the listing broker had a private equity firm that wanted to pay cash for the business. And it was a very solid cash flowing business. And the seller and the buyer got along, that were separate, where there would be SBA funding. And the broker kept pushing to go the other route, saying SBA is going to take too long, which it won't if you're working with the right people.
Right. Yes.
And the broker got in the way and pushed hard to that seller to get your cash now. And it went that route, sadly. And we almost had it with the SBA funding with the buyer. So what I'm hearing is what you just explained, the seller and the buyer having this solid relationship, it almost sounds like that was a behind the scenes private sale, not on the market, no other cooks in the kitchen, just you putting the two together, and it matched, and nobody else was steering them into a different direction.
Well, it happened when I was an intermediary, and it's happened plenty of times when I'm an intermediary. And there's lots of good intermediaries, and there's infinitely more garbage ones who are self-serving and just care about getting the deal to the finish line. They don't care if you buy the right business. Not all of them care about what's best for the seller, or trying to do what's best for all the parties in the deal. If your heart and head are in the right place, it doesn't really matter. I fundamentally believe in just the way I operate, and I don't put myself above anybody, but I just say from the way I operate is I want to make sure that when I'm representing a seller, that any buyers we talk to, that they're qualified, that they're capable of getting to the finish line financially and operationally, meaning they may have the money, but they've never done this before. And so they're going to crap the bed on the way and not get to the finish line. So assuming that I'm comfortable that this is a buyer who's going to be able to get to the finish line, my approach has always been the faster that I can get the buyer and seller talking to each other, the better off the whole deal is going to be. I'll be the, captain the ship, but let them figure out with some guidance and input how to get to the finish line. and if they have a really good, meaningful relationship and a trusting relationship, they get the brokers don't sell businesses. Brokers help facilitate them. So if you adapt that attitude, buyers and sellers, the seller sells their business, the buyer makes a decision whether or not to buy. So you got to let them do their thing. It's just a much better way of getting a deal done, at least in my opinion. And it's worked brilliantly for many, many, many years. You
Great.
can't screw, because if not, you get into the middle, you screw it up.
Right. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen is not good.
No good. Not too good.
No, not too good. Well, another post-acquisition challenge could be client retention.
Yep.
Right. And I'm looking at a deal right now where the client retention is questionable because the seller, since 1982, and this happens a lot with these baby boomer business owners, his customers have no contracts and it's just handshakes. And the new
That's
buyers,
beautiful. Not necessarily if you're a buyer, but it's a beautiful way to run your business. Nice,
and that it
trusting
is
way.
common. It's still common today. We see the handshake deals, and of course, one of the clients is 40% of the revenues.
No, that's more problematic.
More problematic. So, but client retention, post-acquisition challenge. How do you nip it in the bud prior to signing the sale transaction? What would you recommend, Richard?
Well, first thing, buyers need to understand that there's very few businesses, if any, where a client is going to be bound to the business to perpetuity. Even if you have contracts in place, whatever, unless it's an ongoing nature where there's a very significant requirement for the services, most of these transactions, the client can get out of the deal pretty quickly. And so it provides a level of comfort, but it's not bulletproof. Okay. And so and the reality is, if your client's not happy, they're going to find a way to go elsewhere anyways. And so I understand the concern for a buyer. I'm less concerned about the clients continuing, and you can have an opportunity to meet with those clients. I've done it in cases where a buyer comes in, there's a high level of discomfort. I tell the seller, take him to a bunch of appointments, introduce him as a new salesperson, and they can at least witness how you interact with your client. They get some sense of that. The much deeper concern that I have related to your comments is the customer concentration, because that business overnight can go out of business if that one client with the 40% concentration goes. And so in that situation, and the SBA won't do it, but you typically have to have an earnout, because the only way that deal gets done is you come up with a value of the business. The whole business is $100, and here's the based on the profitability of the business with all the customers is $100, and the profitability of the business without that customer is $50. And so you should be paying $50 for that business, with an opportunity for the seller to earn another $50 if the customer stays on board. But to me, one of the biggest red flags is customer concentration.
You know it. And yes, you are absolutely right. No bank is going to finance that deal, but that doesn't mean a buyer can't find another source to get the deal done.
And you know what? And they can find other ways to get comfortable with it. You have earnouts, or there are other ways, 100%. And you're very open-minded about that, which is great, because I know you do SBA deals, and you're great at it. But it's, the world has to understand, there are other ways of getting these deals to the finish line, which are commonplace. And it's those are the ones that can't get done through SBA type deals. They're very doable.
They're very doable.
More than doable. Yeah.
And I have heard success stories of these
tons
kinds of businesses where the new buyer coming in turned it around within 2 years, and all of a sudden it's just taken off, because there is value with a business that's been around since 1982.
Oh, absolutely. They're doing something right. One of the things that, we talked about earlier before the show, actually, when I was thinking about the transitions, one of the big things that buyers should also understand is that during the time of the transition, it's not the time to be doing anything stupid. I tell people, for the first 60 to 90 days, sometimes longer, up to not 69, 90 to 180 days, you do nothing. You just go in there and you learn, and you understand the business and how it works, and get some insight into the people and understand the operations. You can't sit on the outside. And it's a huge mistake buyers make during the buying process, that they think they're going to go in there and make all these changes to the business. And because they're a Monday morning quarterback, they haven't operated in it. It's very easy from the outside to sit and critique what the
Right.
business should or should not be doing. But the smartest way is go in, shut your mouth. You got 2 years and one mouth for a reason. Shut up, do no harm, as they say, and learn the business in a reasonable period of time. And once you have the guts of the business in your belly, then you could make changes or implement, initiatives. Now, certainly if there's something critical that has to be addressed, that's different. But just in the general running and planning, you have to understand the business first.
There you go. Perfect timing, because it's at the half-hour mark and we're going to walk into Who's the Dupa.
Who's
Are
the
you ready?
dupa?
I think we're ready, Richard.
I
Let's
was
bring it
born
on.
ready. Okay. I think we're waiting to see us.
Excellent. This
I
was
love that part. I
Yes.
always wait. I don't know exactly when it's coming, but it's always a welcome. It's a welcome addition.
It is a welcome addition. So this was posted on one of the social media boards out there with Q&A regarding business buying, business acquisitions. And this is a buyer. And the comment was, I see many business owners selling their businesses, personally owning and driving exorbitant luxury cars, and expensing the vehicle loan payments and maintenance to the business. Every broker listing I come across has a summary that adds these outrageous vehicle expenses to the SDE, the seller discretionary earnings of the business. Is it fair to add back to the business cash flow for the luxury personal car expense, which increases the price of the business, and now I have to pay for it as the new buyer? Who's the dupa here, Richard?
The buyer.
Okay.
Well, of course you have to add it back, because unless the business requires a luxury vehicle to drive sales and revenue in the business, that's a personal decision of the seller. And now the way that deeper than that is this: if the seller's vehicle, if it was a $150,000 fancy Ford 350 all decked out pickup truck, and they needed that in the running of the business to make deliveries or what have you, or the construction business, and that's just way overpriced. Well, you would add it back and then offset it for what it costs that a new owner would have to have a vehicle to perform the same job, because the vehicle is needed in the business. But in this case, it doesn't sound like that. And so the buyer just has a gripe about the fact that the seller is driving a very expensive vehicle and they're adding it back. Well, after the sale is over, the seller takes that vehicle and they drive away. And so you're not going to have to make those payments. All that money that was made for those came from the business to make those payments. You now have the use of. So of course it's an add back. And the focus shouldn't be on the luxury vehicles. That's how that seller, that's some of the perks of owning a good business.
Oh, and I know I've seen many of those luxury vehicles.
Why not? That's what you work for. If not, go work for someone else. If you want, you want to drive a Camry, go work for someone else. You want a shot to drive a 750 BMW, you probably have to be in your own business.
Now, what if the vehicle isn't included, but they're adding it back? What if the vehicle goes with the seller, but they're
it would go with the seller, but the buyer has the use of those funds.
The use of those funds, correct.
Right. So they have a car payment, $1,000 a month lease that they're putting through the business. Okay. And the seller's driving that fancy BMW. And then the day happens, the business sells, and the next day the seller takes their vehicle and they go away, and they now have to personally pay for their lease. Right. Well, the buyer has an extra $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month that they're not spending on a luxury vehicle. So of course it gets added back, even if they take that vehicle. But again, that differs from whether the case is when the vehicle is required in the business.
Right.
Then it's usually an offset, or the vehicle should remain in the business as part of the assets that transfer over free and clear.
And I would gather there probably would be depreciation expense on that vehicle as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If that vehicle is required to be a depreciation, and they have to have an offset for capital expenditures. But the way this buyer describes it, this is a personal vehicle of the owner who uses it, go back and forth to work, and probably, maybe the odd appointment or whatever the case may be. But it is not a requirement that the business has this vehicle.
Mhm.
or another vehicle like that in order to conduct the business. So I don't understand what they're bitching and moaning about.
Yeah.
To me, it's like math. This is an obvious add back. So yes, this was the easiest. Who's the duper you've ever
There
asked?
you go. There you go.
Unless you disagree, then I'm completely I'm all ears.
No, no. I wouldn't mind driving one of those nice cars myself, but not
And you
today.
deserve it. And you deserve it.
I'd look good in a Ford Mustang, I think. I've seen a lot of those
Oh,
out
you'd look good in a
in the
Mustang. You look
parking
good in a Ferrari.
lot. Yes. Well, let's pick one more post-acquisition challenge, and I'm going to let you pick it this time. We'll make it 3 before we're out of here at 2:45. So you pick. What's a third post-acquisition challenge that you see happen a lot, and what do we need to do to get around it?
How to interact with the employees.
Okay.
The employees are petrified when a business is sold. Now,
Mhm.
I know without question that the new owner needs the employees more than the old owner does, because the new owner has no idea what they're doing. The old owner knows employee strengths, they know their weaknesses, they know their baggage, they've all had their internal rating of each one of them. If one of them quits, if as long as it's not a critically key individual, to replace them. The buyer doesn't have that knowledge. And so, but the employees are all worried they're going to lose their jobs. And
Mhm.
it's so important that a buyer, before closing, if possible, but it's usually not always the case where the seller allows you complete access to the employees. But minute number 1, when you're introduced to the employees, is you're ready with a question and answer document that we actually have this in the course. You have a whole post purchase priorities, and you go through the questions of what typical questions the employer is going to be worried about. And the first thing you tell employees is there are no changes. Everybody's job, as long as everybody does their job, nobody here has to fear about their job. And the optimal thing being is, as long as you do your job. That doesn't mean you don't have an out if someone is not doing a job, but immediately put people at ease that I'm the new owner. I'm not making any change. Everybody, as long as you keep doing your job, we're going to get along fine. There are some changes we're going to look to make with your input and involvement. And I'm going to ask you a billion questions over time, but no changes. And one of the biggest reasons why I bought this business is because of you guys.
That's
And
right.
so you've got to put them immediately at ease. If you don't, they go into panic mode.
Mhm.
And
Right.
rightfully so. I mean, when I say rightfully so, is because they don't know.
Mhm.
So what people are uncertain about causes a lot of heartburn.
That's right.
So set
Heartburn.
the record straight. That's day one. It's the first thing after you turn off the alarm and make your coffee. That's the first thing you do. Day one is a new owner of the business. The introduction by the seller and you putting everybody at ease.
Sit and observe, like you say, for at least what, 6 months, 12 months? Right?
Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 6 or
Mhm.
12, whatever, until you have that
Mhm.
a deep understanding of the business. You do no harm, because if not, you're going to screw it up. What you think is the business needs, you don't know enough yet. You only know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. I want to toss in here because a lot of buyers today seem to think that they can just acquire a boring business, buy it, finance it, and not do anything, not even show up and sit and just keep working their full-time job, or they treat it like it's just an investment and that the money is going to keep coming in. They don't even meet the employees. They just, oh man, I invested in this business. It's great. I got a salary. It's cash flowing, and they don't even participate in the first 6 to 12 months.
Well, you know what? Part of what you say is correct. Yes, they can do it. The
Mhm.
part where what's wrong is that money's going to keep coming in. No, what's going to happen is you can do all that. You can buy those businesses,
Yeah.
and you could say you want to be an absentee owner, and all sounds wonderful. And then boom, reality hits you on day one. Okay, and then you can't run absentee run businesses until you learn that business, and you have to work in the business.
Yeah.
Because if you have in a business, it's got 2 employees, and they're showing up, and you're an absentee owner, and on day 2 they decide not to show up. Okay, what are you going to do? Quit your job to go work in the laundromat? I mean, give me a break. These absentee run businesses, I mean, that are pitched all over the place, they can be very viable, but it's a transition. It doesn't happen on day one. And absentee run businesses usually equal absentee profits unless you do it in a methodical, good way. If not, you just might as well take your money and light it on fire.
Man, for sure. There was a post the other day on LinkedIn, a fella that purchases laundromats, and he's wrote a book, and I'm at a loss at his last name, but his first name is Mark. And he purchases laundromats, and he did a post the other day that he's getting tired of people talking about how boring laundromats are. He claims that when those machines go down, it is costly to hire people to fix them. So he's the one going in and fixing it.
He goes in and fixes them, and I had a similar situation. I looked at buying a bunch of laundromats. I think they're fantastic businesses. Yeah, they're okay. Boring. I mean, what does boring mean? Okay, I mean, what do you want to? You want your pants on fire every day, or you want to feel like ecstatic? I mean, what? It's okay. It's a boring, bland. I like bland, boring, unsexy businesses because I think you fly under the radar, and you could make some subtle changes. So I get that conceptually, but he's 100% right. I looked at a laundromat and I looked at the numbers and said, geez, these numbers are really good. And it was not to be run absentee. I was going to learn that business. And then when I dug into it further, I realized that the owner of the business was doing all the repairs and I can't do the repairs. And so I had to start looking at how much time was being spent on repairing these things, because I'd have to bring in a third party to do the repairs, and then realize this ain't so profitable. And I ended up not buying the business. So how are you going to do that absentee? Or if in a perfect case, that one of the big machines goes down and your employee is standing there and saying, I don't know what to do. Call the boss. Hey, boss, the big Wasco mat 50-pound washer is down and people are waiting. Oh, should I now just step out of my meeting at my full-time job and race over there and try to figure out what's wrong with the machine or try to find a technician? So this guy, Mark, who wrote this thing, he's spot on. I mean, I'm sure he knows his stuff, and people would be probably better served to follow his advice versus those who claim they know what they're doing in those businesses because they happen to buy one laundromat. This guy's probably seen thousands of them. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. You got to, deal with believable parties. Yeah. Like you said at the beginning of the show.
I'll get you introduced to him. He wrote a book about laundromat business.
I'm sure it's terrific. I'm actually going to look him up as well.
I will. Wonderful. So we're at 1:42. I think we're going to probably slow the bus down and get out of here by 1:45, as we promise everyone. Can you share before we head out your 10 things that sellers won't tell you? Give us a little bit of feedback of that for our listeners, Richard.
Okay, so it's a great report, if I do say so myself. Very, it's an easy read, but it's about 40 pages and walks through some of the non-obvious items that a seller will not disclose to a buyer, related to terms, related to conditions, related to financing, if there's any issue with key employees or key customers or growth initiatives. So it really dives deep into those areas where contractually they're not necessarily material items that a seller is obligated to disclose to a buyer, okay, as part of a contract to purchase a business. But they're items that are big and they exist. And so you need to know how to uncover them. And so it's a really good read. And you were great to provide a whole lot of content related to the financing section. So thank you for that. We get great feedback. I mean, we've had it available for a number of months, and we keep getting demands for these every day, lots of them. And so it's very, we know that people find it very, very helpful. We get great feedback. So thank you for the plug. But anybody who's thinking about buying a business, you definitely want to read that report. And you can go to richardparker.com. And there's all kinds of free reports and articles that are available there.
And in addition to richardparker.com, he will have posted up there, ladies and gentlemen, his next free webinars for aspiring business buyers that want to listen and learn from Richard, from his 20, 30 years of experience, and his course that is reasonably priced for all the right reasons, because he wants you to be successful. Today's topic was post-acquisition challenges. And you mentioned, Richard, in your course, you actually have a chapter with a checklist of those challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's called post-purchase priorities. And here's what to do in your first 90 days. Very specific. Follow this plan. You're going to be good. I mean,
I love that, because a lot of the courses today are just about how to buy, how to buy, how to buy. Okay, but what about after that?
How to run. How to run it.
Successful. Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a key thing. And the transition that we're talking about today, and you pointed out, related to some issues that come up, but the transition, this is not something that just impacts the lower market. One of the biggest problems before being addressed in a better way in the whole world of institutional buyers, private equity firms, family offices buying larger businesses. One of the biggest problems was they did a terrible job post acquisition. And they've really adjusted their thinking to there's now companies that specialize in the transition. It's the SWAT team of M&A transitions, and they pre-plan for a very effective transition. It's that important at that level and at the smallest business possible. That transition period, I mean, it can in many cases make or break you.
That's right. Boy, am I grateful to have you on the show and have you as a co-host. With that being said, we're at the 1:45 mark, 2:45 for all you Eastern folks. We're glad you joined us. We'll be back next week, Thursday at 2 p.m. Richard, thanks for all you do for the small business and the middle market arena when it comes to learning how to buy a business.
Thank you, Deb. And you're the greatest when it comes to lending. I tell everybody, if you even have a thought related to SBA financing, get in touch with you. And I love spending our time together. I know we get a chance to talk during the week, but this is so enjoyable. So thank you. It's great.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.